Right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Niels Levy-Thiebaut, a rising sophomore, majoring in Plan 2 in biochemistry. And I'm joined today by Dr. Sapna Singh, who's a Plan 2 alum who now works at Texas Children's. So to start this off, Dr. Singh, could you tell me a little bit about your background? So, why you chose UT in Plan 2, and then what your experience as a Plan 2 pre-med was like?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you first for having me. Yeah, it's like a blast from the past. Every time I think about how long it's been, I'm like, really? Because it feels like it was just yesterday. No, UT Austin, for me, I actually live in Fort Bend County and I graduated from Clements High School. And so a huge number of my graduating class actually did go to UT. And I was actually more interested in trying to attend an Ivy League school with a liberal arts, background. And so I had applied to some schools, Brown, a couple of different programs out on the East Coast. And I actually was accepted. However, financially, it wasn't going to be feasible. And I have two younger siblings, and my father was trying to get all of us through college, not just me. So I began to look more locally, and I found Plan 2 as an honors program through the University of Texas at Austin. And I applied. I'd heard it was really competitive, so I was not super optimistic, but I was super fortunate to get in. And actually, it was myself and I think the valedictorian were the only two people in our graduating class who were accepted. Um, and so I knew I was going to be pre-med, so I was already focused on making sure I was going to get all my pre-med prerequisites in, but Plan 2 offered, I felt like, a little bit of a different aspect of education, which I loved reading, I loved writing, I was very strong in it. Like my SAT was a perfect score in verbal, so I knew I would have to do something liberal arts based as well. And I think Plan 2 just ended up being a perfect fit. So I was really, really fortunate to be accepted.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. And what kind of stuff were you involved in during your time at UT?
Oh boy. Okay, so I'll start with I actually was a double major. So I entered UT as a chemical engineering Plan 2 pre-med major, and I had a scholarship through the Cockrell Foundation to engineering. And so I was there on a full ride. And what I very quickly, actually within 2 years, I guess it's not too quickly, figured out was I was very bad at engineering. I mean, horribly bad at it. And I was fortunate enough to fail one of my courses. And the dean was actually at the time, I have to go back and think of his name. He was so wonderful. He was the professor for that course. He asked me to come back in the summer to retake the final because he really didn't believe that I failed from a lack of just trying. I mean, he just felt like I maybe didn't have the time. I was taking upwards of 15 to 18 hours a semester. So, I was doing a lot because I was trying to put all those different prereqs in, plus Plan 2, plus chemi. It was a lot. It was definitely more than I should have been doing. And I failed the test again. And he had a very frank conversation with me about what I wanted to do with myself, what I wanted to do with my life. And he sat me down and said, engineering's not working. Is this really what you want to do? And I told him, no, this is my backup. If I don't get into medical school, I kind of think I need a career, right? Like I was very afraid of just doing biology or chemistry separately, which is what everyone else was doing. Because I kept thinking, what will I do if I don't get into med school? Doubted myself quite a bit. He gave me kind of really good advice. He was like, you need to really figure out what you're good at. And then you also need to figure out what you're very bad at. And you need to let it go. And so I let engineering go along with my scholarships. And basically I think I worked in the Plan 2 office for a while, actually worked at the front desk to earn some money. And I was also, through his help, able to get some liberal arts scholarships kind of scrapped together, and then completed my last 2 years in Plan 2 pre-med, and then ended up minoring in South Asian studies. So super different from chemical engineering, but that's what I was doing academically. socially, I was really involved with the South Asian community there. I was actually the president of the Indian Student Association my senior year. I don't even know if that still exists. I know you guys have a lot of frats and sororities now.
It definitely does. Yeah. My husband's best friend was in it and he was kind of an honorary member. So yes, it is.
Yeah, it was the largest organization on campus at the time I was president. We had 700 plus members, and yeah, it was really big. And I used to do a lot of talent shows. I loved dancing, Indian dancing. So there was a ton of that where we compete. But yeah, I was very involved in kind of the social stuff, but stuck closely. I think a lot of it was very South Asian oriented, except for with my Plan 2 friends, because that was a totally different world, right? Plan 2, you guys, we function in a different bubble. And so, yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun with those guys as well, but that's kind of a really kind of academic and social, I guess, what I was doing at UT.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you had a good balance, but that must have been a very, very difficult decision, to switch out of engineering and, lose that scholarship and have to look at other avenues. So how did you decide to pursue pediatrics then?
So, pediatrics actually was not what I thought I would be doing when I was initially going to medical school. I really enjoyed, believe it or not, geriatrics and also neurology. And so I thought the more I was in medical school that those fields would probably be what I'd be attracted to. I really enjoyed the clinical science portion of that. But as I got to the part where I was on the ground in the hospital working with patients, it was actually my pediatric surgery rotation where I found myself wanting to be at the hospital hours and hours and hours. I mean, I would leave rounds at like 9 p.m. or 10 where I'd finish my work and I'd be back at the hospital at 3 a.m., to pre-round for surgeries. And I loved it. The rotation was like my favorite rotation. And after I left, I thought, well, is it surgery? But then I went on to do adult surgery as the next rotation. And I absolutely hated it. I just was like, okay, it's not the surgery. It was the patients. And so I found myself drawn to pediatrics from there. The breadth and just depth of science and physiology for pediatrics, we take care of everybody from birth to, graduation. And so you're looking at a body that transforms from that small stage to an adult, sized body, the chemical changes, the hormone changes, the emotional, the mental, all the things that go into a person becoming an adult is just fascinating to me. So I really love the science in pediatrics, but more than that, the interactions. You can't find a job where you get to hug people, high five, and also blow bubbles all day. Like that's my life. In addition to doing medicine, we have a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that sounds like an amazing job which you must really enjoy. And so could you tell me also a little bit about your current work on the Texas Children's Pediatrics Engagement and Wellness Committee, and also as a Harvard Global Pediatric Leadership Fellow?
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll backtrack into the Harvard part first. So, something that I think was really ingrained in me by being in Plan 2, very honestly, I think being in Plan 2 and the way that program sets you up to be an independent thinker and a person who enjoys, for me, I think it really helped me realize I'm a lifelong learner and I love to learn. And I feel like the structure of Plan 2 is set up where you have that flexibility to explore things that are of interest to you. Not just what is kind of boxed into a curriculum, but really giving you the opportunity to kind of expand what you think and go out there and explore it and research it and bring it back, to give you that enthusiasm for learning. So for me, the Harvard program was brought up as it's a global pediatric leadership program. And we were able to go to London, Shanghai, and eventually we ended up in Boston and basically studied healthcare systems across the world and how those healthcare systems manage pediatrics. So it was fascinating. We got to kind of see everything from healthcare systems that are fully funded and children have no costs, incurred on the families at all, to the American system where we try to take care of our kids, but I'll be very honest, we still have some gaps we need to fill. But really an interesting experience across the entire world. And then the leadership portion that I got from that program kind of melded into this new wellness initiative. Post-COVID, I think we found that healthcare workers across the spectrum, not just physicians, are burnt out. I think a lot of flaws in our healthcare system were very openly visualized as we moved through so much stress in COVID and the pandemic. And also just, you've seen the mistrust. There's a lot more discussion about whether physicians can be trusted, whether science is always truthful, whether people's intentions are always, correct. So the wellness and engagement programs are now becoming a much more talked about part of healthcare, and large organizations, I'm lucky enough that Texas Children's is taking this on, are now exploring how do we help the caregivers so that they can then give the best quality care and provide the best access to their patients. Because when the caregiver themselves is burnt out, and that's in any situation, they just are not able to function at the top of what they're capable of giving. And so this is where my role will be to help look at, not just on an individual level, what I can do to help physicians do better, work-life balance wise, self-care, those type of things, but look at systemic issues that might be creating some of that stress and burnout. Is there work that's being put on us that we could move to somebody else's, queue? Are there things that I can do that go beyond, clicking and documenting and filling out paperwork all day, and really put me back in the seat with my patients, which is what I want to do. That's what I went to medical school for. And the more medicine moves away from that, the more you see physicians really start to hurt and get disillusioned. And I think we're trying to really focus on bringing that back to the exam rooms, getting us back where we wanted to be from the beginning.
Yeah, that sounds like very fascinating work. And during your time at UT, did you kind of explore those areas at all of medicine, or explore that facet of medicine?
In terms of it's interesting because I think that what I got through being in Plan 2 was that we have such a focus on the humanities and on the just literature and learning about other cultures and the diversity there exists out there in terms of the fine arts and stuff. I think what that's helped me with is being able to cope much better with my own stresses, because I've never been boxed into thinking that my whole life is just medicine. I wasn't even in that place at UT. For me, I was pre-med, but I was also Plan 2. And it always helped because my left brain was always being, stimulated. I was never just stuck in the anatomy and phys world, or just trying to pass organic chemistry, which I'm sure, I don't know if you're taking it this year.
Yes.
Will be the bane of your existence. And every time I think about Zyrtec versus Zysol, I go back to organic because it's kind of the only time it ever really comes up in my head. But yeah, it's fascinating because it's something that you're getting right now in a very subtle and kind of subconscious way, which is your brain is already learning that it can function on multiple levels, and that when one aspect gets a little bit burnt out, you've got something else to fall back on. I love to read. I mean, you can see my library in the background. I'm an avid reader. I'm very engaged in public policy, legislative stuff. My work with, the wellness committee. I mean, all of these things, I feel like it wasn't a specific class. I can't tell you, I took a class in humanities or I took a class in this. I feel like the combination of those experiences has really put me in a place where I feel very comfortable kind of working on this initiative. I mean, I actually just put a bunch of our doctors through a writing class, a writing workshop. And I'm not kidding. There was like about 4 or 5 of them who had never written since college ever, like not a thing, had not, other than, notes and documentation. But this is something that for me, I feel like I've just carried from Plan 2 from college. It never left me. I never let that go.
Yeah. So I know that you said you don't have any specific, you couldn't say that specific classes led to this outlook on medicine that you have, but are there any Plan 2 courses that kind of do stick out as the most memorable or most enjoyable for you?
So I did have a class. So the reason why I ended up in South Asian Studies is because I think Dr. King, Robert King, I'm not sure if he's still there. He did a class called, I think, India in the West or something. And it was fabulous. He was so fabulous. And then I had a class with, I think, Gail Minot. She did a bunch of courses on Islam in India and women in Asia. And I think that was her focus. She ended up being my thesis, actually, advisor. And I did my thesis on South Asian domestic violence. And it's crazy how much of a weird circle this is coming back, like the idea that some cultures try to control women as opposed to respect them. And anyways, whole other discussion. But it was classes like that and professors like that who I think really inspired me to not just stay even within the Plan 2 world, but to kind of branch out a little bit and even create a focus in that South Asian realm, which was something I was always interested in. It's my background, it's my culture, but I really was then able to kind of study it and research it and work on that.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. So how would you recommend current Plan 2 students to maximize what the program offers and branch out as you did, and learn so much about so many different things that don't really relate to medicine or science necessarily?
Well, I mean, I think that what I would absolutely say in terms of for pre-med students in particular, it's to definitely like look at the whole forest. Like you got to see the big picture. And the classes that you're taking in Plan 2 are offering you windows into things that you're not going to get again, especially if you start your track down medicine. I mean, I was lucky enough that in my courses at Texas A&M, we did have some policy and humanities classes that were offered as electives, but in general, I mean, you're set. Once you're on the course with medicine, it's science, it's clinical, studies, and the idea that you're going to ever get back to digging into the Parisian prowler, really getting into that part of like, how is the writer trying to create this, theme, and it's not going to happen again, so this is your chance to explore things that aren't going to necessarily dictate the rest of your life. But if you really spend the time right now to cultivate and actually like do the work, go to the classes, talk to the professors. I will tell you, my Plan 2 professors were some of my favorite people. It was a Dr. Woodruff. I can't remember if he's still there or not. I mean, open door. You could walk into his office anytime. Just to talk to people who have such beautiful views on the world that are very diverse and very different from what you're going to find. Science is exact, math is exact. It's really tough to get that kind of perspective because, there you're just memorizing and kind of putting stuff back on paper. But when it comes to stuff in the liberal arts area, you guys you have a unique opportunity to study something right now that you may never come across again. You may never see it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that advice. So I kind of want to switch gears to your time at, Texas A&M. So you attended, Texas A&M's medical school, obviously. And so what kind of guided that decision to choose their medical school over other medical schools at that time?
So interestingly enough, kind of, I think it was the Plan 2 experience. At the time that I applied to A&M, there were only 60 students a class, okay? Wow. 60, yeah. So we were very small, very, very small. And we were located in College Station for 2 years and then in Temple, Texas. And Texas A&M was very clinical oriented, meaning you spent all of your time learning how to be at the bedside and how to be in the moment with your patients. Some programs are more research oriented, where you do a lot more research and you learn how to perform research, appropriately, either clinical or even bench research. I chose A&M because I wanted to probably work very closely with patients. I wasn't interested in research so much, but 60 people in the class, and I was coming out of Plan 2, and it felt like a good fit because I didn't know that I could go into a class with 300 people. I just, I had those classes at UT, but I just felt like I was always in a better situation when it was smaller group sizes. And so A&M was small, clinical based. And then, to be very frank, they also offered a lot of policy and legislative type of guidance, because 3 or 4 of our American Medical Association presidents are Texas A&M College of Medicine graduates. So they're pretty aggressive with policy and legislation and teaching us how to be advocates for patients as well.
I see. Yeah, that to continue that liberal arts side of things, or just non-science side of things during medical school.
Yeah.
And do you feel like your Plan 2 background kind of sets you apart when you applied to medical school?
Absolutely. It came up in interviews all the time. In the state of Texas, for sure, Plan 2's reputation back then was solid. I now have heard from multiple people that Plan 2 outside of Texas is considered Ivy League as well. At least that's what it looks like on paper. UT also, the whole game has changed. I mean, to get into UT Austin when I was applying, we used to sign a piece of paper and turn it back in. I mean, that was it. You got accepted. You just had to let them know yes or no, check a box and you go. Now, obviously, it's very competitive. And then you add to that Plan 2 within that school now. I mean, it's the reputation has become, in my opinion, even more respected than when I was there. And I think that for you attending medical school, applying to medical school, it's going to differentiate you from all the other just biochem or biology or chemistry, the folks who are doing those degrees kind of on their own versus somebody who comes in with this degree in addition. Huge difference. And I think people also understand what it takes to be a Plan 2 student, and they understand that your contribution to their medical school class will be quite different than somebody coming from a more traditional pre-med background. So I think in all aspects, for me, it was a huge advantage to have Plan 2 on my resume.
I see. And it looks like you also served on Texas A&M's admissions committee. So were there any, new insights that you got from being on the other side of the process and actually selecting candidates or interviewing them?
I don't know if there were new insights, but I definitely can tell you, I mean, a majority of the people applying to medical school on paper look a lot the same. We all we know the pre-med game, like you got to make this MCAT score, your GPA has to be here, you got to do all the volunteering at blank, blank, blank place. I think what was really interesting for me was people who had unique experiences and also had the ability to speak about those experiences in a way that was genuine and thoughtful. We had people who you'd interview who had volunteered at a hospital, and when you talked to them about it, it was very, yeah, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? I mean, you're supposed to volunteer at a hospital, right, to get into medical school. And then you had folks who would do things that were a little different. They'd volunteer at an animal shelter, or they would be, they'd start a foster service, or there were folks who I know had done certain things through the union organization, like at UT, and, just experiences that were maybe not your traditional pre-med stuff. But when you were talking to somebody about it, the genuine passion and enthusiasm for that really set them apart from all the other applicants. And so my advice now, because I do mentor pre-med students, is that you have to figure out what are you passionate about and then build on that even if it doesn't always fit the traditional pre-med mold, right? So even if it's not just shadowing a doctor at all times, but say you organize a blood drive because one of your family members has benefited from blood transfusions. I had an applicant who did that. Those are things that are just really, really cool. And because the person who has done it was so passionate and really enthusiastic about it, that came across in the interview. It came across in the essays. And when you see somebody who's genuine like that, it's really hard not to want them to be on your team, right? You want to pull them over and be like, I want this person to be here. To the extent that there were people I would be like, man, I want you to be my doctor one day. Like, that's how impressed I was with some of the applications. But more than anything, to not get bogged down by what is the checklist and really focus more on what are my strengths and passions and then work on those.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, that advice. I feel like a lot of us, me included, really do get bogged down in that checklist and just trying to tick all the boxes and do what you're supposed to do for medical school. But it's definitely reassuring to hear that you can actually pursue what you're genuinely interested in and still make it into medical school. So do you have any closing advice for the Plan 2 pre-meds out there? Any last words of wisdom?
I mean, gosh, please enjoy your 4 years or how many ever years you're going to spend at UT. Like, it never comes back. And it's the best years of your life. My time at UT, at Plan 2, I'm like, I get goosebumps. It was really when I've got my UT, degrees. My husband went to UT as well. So, he was in the business school, and we have so many good friends from college that we still keep in touch with. This is the time that you really have to kind of pause and don't fly through it as if it's like the expressway to your next stop. This is in and of itself an experience, right? This is life. Like, you're there, you're in college, your kids are going to want to hear about the stuff you did in college. Go eat lunch out, in front of the tower. Go see your friends in the union. Go have long, lazy lunches on Fridays for like 2 hours and where you don't have to go anywhere. Do the stuff that, go swim at Zilker, the things that you can't get to go back and do again. And obviously work really hard. I mean, for me, getting the grades in and studying was part of the plan. I mean, that was going to happen, and I knew that. But I think what I really wanted was to also have those experiences outside of that. I planned a talent show twice in 1 year as the president of ISA for 1,000 people. It's an experience to have to sell tickets and be at the door and count money and organize 18 acts and everything that goes into that, stuff that had nothing to do with pre-med. It just didn't have anything to do, and it never really had anything to do with medicine either. But I absolutely, I look back at that time in my life and I smile. So yeah, as a pre-med student, I know that checklist bogs you down. I remember it. You hear everyone else is doing all these amazing things. The next person over is, did you hear they got into DeBakey for like blah, blah, blah research on micro DNA for mice? And, you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, I didn't get any research this year. I did zero research, zero. I've never worked in a lab. I hate it. I don't have that personality. I can't be, micro pipetting for 4 hours. I hated all my labs that I had to do that in college. So I knew that wasn't my passion, but the places where I wanted to do things and make it happen, I worked 110% in those places. And I had fun. I had a great time. And when I applied to medical school, I was super honest about what I wanted. And yeah, I mean, the most important thing you can do is be super genuine and be honest with yourself. And then working hard will get you where you want to be. I mean, I think that all of you guys in Plan 2 are brilliant. Just to be there, you have to work really hard and be amazing to get into the program. But if you really utilize like the strengths and also all the opportunities that you have there, med school will be no big deal. It'll be no big deal for you guys. You know how to write. I mean, I'm not even kidding. That's part of that. Half the battle right there is writing an essay. Not everybody knows how to write well. it's shocking when you leave Plan 2 and you find out how people string sentences together. I apologize. It's being able to write well, communicate, express yourself. That's the gift of being in Plan 2. I feel like you really get to hone that while you're there.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for, all of this advice and all of this help. I know that I've learned a lot, and a lot of the other Plan 2 pre-grads will be listening to this. We'll just learn so much from you and your experience. So thank you so much for your time.